Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla Apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Welcome. This is Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. See, here we talk news, politics, history, style, food, and more. I'm a veteran of 13 national presidential campaigns. You might say I spent 45 years in the corroded rectum of the two-party system. I've pretty much seen it all. But I've written books that are harshly critical of the Bush family as well as the Clintons. I'm not a lockstep Republican. I have a deep sentimental attachment to the party of Abraham Lincoln, Dwight Eisenhower, Barry Goldwater, Ronald Reagan, of course, my mentor, Richard Nixon, and now Donald J. Trump. But I also call them as I see them, and I've had plenty of criticism for Republicans like Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and others. The big news today, of course, is a new New York Times Siena poll showing Donald Trump leading his opponent, Kamala Harris, by 1 point. This is a shift. A previous New York Times Siena College poll, I believe, had Kamala Harris up by 3. I think that was a bounce from her convention. Conventions really today are extended, television infomercials. But it's important to understand something about polling. Polling is a snapshot in time. It is only actually accurate in that episecond in which it is published. Public opinion is moving so quickly, and the American voters are so volatile that things change, and they can change relatively quickly. Also, not all polls are the same. In other words, there are a number of factors in a poll that determine the outcome. For example, the sample. The sample has to be large enough so that you can look at sub-samples within the group, say white voters, black voters, Hispanic voters, older voters, younger voters, voters by region, so that you can look at different segments of the electorate. Now, you can cook a poll. There's a number of ways. You could, for example, oversample Democrats and undersample Republicans. We've seen a lot of that actually in this cycle, immediately after the Democrat National Convention. There's also the wording of the questions. The questions have to be worded in a totally dispassionate way. In other words, you can't load the questions. And then there's something called order bias. That's the order in which the questions are asked. In other words, if you introduce negative information about any given candidate prior to taking that horse race head-to-head ballot question, well, you're going to affect the outcome of the question. And then there is a particular phenomena that I think is not common to all political figures, but certainly true about Donald Trump, and that is he has a tendency to underpoll. By that, I mean that in this highly charged and divisive atmosphere in America today, There are voters who are just not going to tell a stranger, either over the phone or over the internet, that they're voting for Donald Trump. They don't want to be targeted. They don't want to be harassed. Is this race close? Yes, I think it is close for a couple of reasons. First of all, there is still the mainstream media bias towards Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And while the mainstream media does not have the monopoly it once had, given the proliferation of the internet and more sources of information, they are still extraordinarily influential. But what bothers me a lot more and concerns me is the question of censorship, because the internet is still broadly censored, particularly in the area of social media. So while I think it is great that Elon Musk bought Twitter, now called X, and that has become a platform for free speech, doesn't really matter how liberal or conservative you may be, how strongly you may support Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. All voices are heard at X. I'm grateful to Elon Musk for giving me my voice back on X, because to this day, yes, I'm banned for life at Facebook, which, by the way, if you see a bunch of Roger Stones over there on Facebook trying to sell you cryptocurrency, don't buy it, because, folks, that's not me. I don't have a profile on Facebook, but you can go there, and there are many Roger Stones. None of them are me. It's the future of censorship, not just its impact on this election that disturbs me, but the candidate's attitude about free speech. Let's listen to Kamala Harris.
And will put the Department of Justice of the United States back in the business of justice. We will double the Civil Rights Division and direct law enforcement to counter this extremism. We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms, because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable as a community.
I find that extraordinarily chilling, because who is to say what is disinformation? Who is to say what is misinformation? Who is to say what constitutes hate? As someone who's been on the receiving end of a lot of death threats online, are those folks who are threatening me and my family, are they going to be prosecuted? Are they going to be regulated? We already know that the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency of the U.S. government has already announced that they'll be working with the social media platforms to ban certain content. But who are they in a free society to decide what is true and what is not true? I say that's up to the individual American people. Now let's listen to Donald Trump. He takes a very different view.
But I will sign an executive order banning any federal employee from colluding to limit speech, and we will fire every federal bureaucrat who is engaged in domestic censorship under the Harris regime. We will do that.
You know, I went to school with Robert Reich. He served in Bill Clinton's cabinet. He's a very smart guy. He was a smart guy then. But I didn't know, I knew he was a liberal, but I didn't know that he was an authoritarian. He now believes, and he's written this just this past week, that Elon Musk should be arrested and prosecuted for allowing free speech on his platform. This really blows my mind. John Jay High School, Katona, New York. He was a couple years ahead of me. Very smart guy, but obviously very misguided. The other big development you have, which for some reason the Kamala Harris campaign seems to think is a major plus, is the endorsement of Vice President Dick Cheney. You know him. He's the guy who lied us into war in Iraq. He's the guy who told us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. He's the guy who pressured Colin Powell into saying in front of the UN that the Iraqis had acquired yellow cake uranium for the development of nuclear weapons, which turned out to be a lie that cost tens of thousands of Americans their lives and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis. I don't know why they think that this is a great plus. In fact, if you go back and look at it, Dick Cheney was one of the most unpopular people in the country, and liberals hated him. But they don't hate him today. Well, that's because he's against Donald Trump. I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Network, and we'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show. This is the Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. I saw this great posting on X by my good friend Gunther Eagleman, who says Mike Pence is not for Trump, Mitt Romney's not for Trump, Paul Ryan's not for Trump, Dick Cheney's not for Trump, Liz Cheney's not for Trump. That's why I'm for Trump. I think that pretty much sums it up. Perhaps the Kamala Harris campaign thinks that this is somehow a sign of bipartisanship. No, I think it's a sign that we have a set of ruling elites who have, up until Donald Trump came along, dominated both parties. They are the party of war. They are the party of debt. They are the party of spending. They are the party of illegal immigration. It is sadly one party. It's the incumbent party. I think they got embarrassed badly this week in this entire flap about the Arlington Cemetery. Donald Trump was invited by the 13 Gold Star families who lost loved ones in Afghanistan. They had all, by the way, been to Mar-a-Lago to visit with President Trump and spent many hours with them. He had bonded with them. This was not a photo op. He knew them, had heard their stories, had met with them. Then they rolled out Jim McCain, who I guess is the son of John McCain, and then John McCain's daughter, Meghan McCain, to criticize Donald Trump for using the Arlington National Cemetery, where the folks who have served this country are buried, as a political backdrop. The problem with that is John McCain himself filmed a TV commercial for his own presidential campaign at Arlington Cemetery. And Joe Biden did a press conference from there, paid for and posted online by his campaign. A little hypocrisy there. In the case of Meghan McCain, she used a photo of her father's tombstone to promote a book. No, Donald Trump is held to a far, far different standard. Here's how we know the Democrats are extraordinarily nervous, maybe even apoplectic and close to hysterical. That's right. We're going to recycle the Russia canard, the hoax, the Russian collusion delusion. Listen to this.
Donald Trump's campaign chairman was secretly meeting with Russian intelligence.
Russia interfered with our election, attacked our democracy.
I think he's guilty because he knows.
What did he do?
Okay. Well, he's the one who can answer that. I think.
No, what is he? You said he's guilty. What's he guilty of?
Well, I think he feels that there is something that's going to come out about Russia. Remember?
Why are other Americans basically believing Putin? Why did Trump believe Putin more than our 11 intelligence agencies?
I don't know. Do you have a working theory?
I do have a working theory.
Well, the role of the government, in his view, is to advance his political fortunes and destroy his political enemies. So what would a second term look like? It would look a lot like Vladimir Putin in Russia. It would look a lot like Viktor Orban in Hungary, illiberal democracy. Meaning
2016, the Russians intervened heavily in our election to try to elect Donald Trump. They intervened with a massive social media campaign run out of St. Petersburg. They intervened by hacking the Democratic Party.
Well, it is like Watergate in the sense that you had a break-in at the Democratic headquarters, in this case, a virtual one, not a physical break-in. And you had a president as part of a cover-up. And here you have a president doing a different kind of cover-up.
Are you worried that Putin could be attempting, and the Kremlin could be attempting to intervene in our election in 2024? And should we all be spending more time talking about that?
I am very concerned about it. It wouldn't be the first time that...
This is, of course, all nonsense. Let's take it one by one. Paul Manafort, who's accused of sharing polling information with a Russian intelligence asset at a time when the Trump campaign had no proprietary polling information, shared it with a man named Konstantin Kilimnik, who, although Robert Mueller and others insist is a Russian intelligence agent, was actually a U.S. intelligence asset, as absolutely documented by the independent journalist Matt Taibbi. The claim that I was communicating with Guccifer 2.0, who they say was a Russian asset. Well, first of all, our 28-word exchange on Twitter, direct messages, which I myself released, is innocuous. But more importantly, it took place 3 months after the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton emails had already been published by WikiLeaks. So unless I had a time machine, sorry, no collusion. Then there is the claim that Don Jr. met with a Russian lawyer. What we don't tell you is that Russian lawyer was briefed and debriefed by the folks at Fusion GPS. That's the folks who cooked up the phony Steele dossier. And as for the claim that the Democrat National Committee was hacked by the Russians, well, the head of CrowdStrike, the company that made that claim, testified under oath before the House Intelligence Committee that he had no such proof. No wonder the judge wouldn't let me produce witnesses like Bill Binney, the counter intelligence expert from the CIA, or other forensic evidence that would have proved that there never was any Russian online hack of the DNC. And in fact, to the extent that data was stolen, it was downloaded based on the time of the downloads to a portable drive and taken out the back door. And as for Adam Schiff's claim that there was a massive social media campaign, yeah, they spent $40,000 in a multi-billion-dollar campaign, and their messaging was not even consistently anti-Hillary Clinton. I'm Roger Stone, right here on the Red Apple Audio Network, and I'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show, and now I am joined by evangelist Jonathan Shuttlesworth, who has been preaching the gospel full-time since May of 2002. He and his wife, Adalis Shuttlesworth, are with the Revival Today ministry, which is dedicated to reaching those who have never heard the gospel of Jesus Christ. I tried to get him on the show last week, but he was preaching the Lord's word in Nigeria. He's just gotten back, and we are delighted to have him with us today. In the interest of full disclosure, when my wife was fighting aggressive stage 4 cancer, Pastor Shuttlesworth was both an enormous spiritual and personal assistance to me, for which I will always be grateful. And I thank God for my friendship with him. Pastor Shuttlesworth, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thanks. How are you and Mrs. Stone?
I'm delighted to hear your voice. I love watching your ministry on social media. You are literally reaching tens of thousands of people, not just in the United States, but around the globe, preaching the Lord's word, not just in North America, but in India, in the Caribbean, Central and South America. It is impressive. Your level of energy is impressive. You always seem to be on an airplane when you're not preaching the word of the Lord. Let me ask you, I think a good place is, what do you say to those who say, well, pastors should stay out of politics?
I would say if it was 20 years ago, I'd be happy to stay out of politics because there'd be no point in getting in it. Republicans and Democrats didn't get involved in a marriage discussion. There was no such thing as transgender children. And I could go down a long list. And then about 2012, 2014, it started to get to the point where you can't have an opinion about anything to do with the family without getting what would be called political. The second thing I would say is I don't understand in a representative government why one group of people are supposed to not be represented. You never hear anybody called a Muslim nationalist or a business nationalist or a Hindu nationalist, but it seems like there's one group of people that the powers that be want to keep their mouths shut, and I don't understand it. It's equal representation in American government, so I feel like everyone should be allowed to speak.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm confounded when people call me a Christian nationalist and they think it's an insult. Yes, I am a Christian. I'm redeemed in the blood of the cross. I've turned my life back over to Christ. I admit that I wandered far from the Lord, but in time of trouble, as they say, there are no atheists in foxholes. I returned to the church. It's the single best decision I ever made. And yeah, I'm a nationalist in the sense that I love my country. I'm proud of my country. I want my country to be just and free and prosperous. But they hurl this at you as if it is an insult. And then when you say that people like you and I see what's going on in America today as a spiritual battle, we're criticized for that. That's hate speech. That's not hate speech.
Yeah, and don't push and then tell me I can't push back. You know, when people bring this up, that a pastor shouldn't really be political, I'd be happy not to be political. When you have Beto O'Rourke run for the Democrat presidency from the Democrat side, and he says any church or Bible school that won't perform gay marriage will lose their tax exempt status. Well, you can't threaten things like that and expect the church to just keep their mouth shut. So you got us involved. We were happy to just preach the Bible. But I'll tell you another thing. You're not going to get too deep into the Bible. The Bible deals with society and behavior. And so when you start having government overreach, I would flip it. Why is the government involved? You're supposed to build schools, pave roads, defend the borders. When did you start getting involved in marriage and child raising? You know, it's not us that crossed over into your domain. You crossed over into our domain.
Extremely well put. You know, I found a new thing in the old days because I'm somewhat controversial, and thanks to our friends at CNN, very recognizable. People often, you know, will come up to me in restaurants or airports or other public spaces, and sometimes they use obscenities or accuse me of being a Russian spy, which is ridiculous. In the old days, I used to hit them back, you know, with an F-bomb myself. But now I say, wow, you're so misguided. I'm going to pray for you. And that seems to make them crazier than anything you could possibly say.
That's true. It's almost like people want you to hate them back. And if you like Jesus said, if you return their hate with love, it makes them even angrier. That's all. I mean, look, that's all Jesus did. He never reviled against people that were insulting him. And where did it get him? It got him nailed to the cross. So that's people for you.
Well, also President Richard Nixon, who in his farewell address said, others may hate you, but unless you hate them back, you lose and you destroy yourself. Extremely well put. You have done a series of sermons that I've been watching, which I really love. You've talked about the laws of supernatural power, and I know this is hard to break down in the little time we have. Every time I talk to you, I wish we had more time, but talk to us about this.
What are you talking about in the realm of politics? How to spot politicians.
That's a good
from
place.
A Bible standpoint?
That's a good a place to start. Yes.
Well, the Bible is different from other religious books in that it's about 1/3 prophecy, foretelling of events, and they're not vague prophecies. They're very specific. So one of them is that there's going to be a one world ruler, and this is not God's plan. This is the Antichrist. It's the devil's agenda, that there's going to be a one world government, a one world ruler, a one world military to carry out his edicts, a one world economy, and a one world religion, which my dad's a preacher. When I would hear him preach that in the 80s, it sounded insane that America would ever come under a one world government. It's almost like you knew it was in the Bible, but maybe it'll be everywhere but America. I can't see this ever happening. So now as time's gone on, and it's very clear to see. I mean, for my dad to preach in the 1980s, what the Bible says, no man will be able to buy or sell unless he's given a mark in his hand or in his forehead. That sounded absolutely insane through the 80s and 90s even. And now biometric everything, a microchip smaller than a grain of rice that can be put under the skin. It's technology that's already in use. So the Bible told you these things are going to happen. And then it tells you about the Antichrist, tells you what his policies are going to be. And so I wanted to educate American Christians in particular, because as you've seen, people used to understand voting on policy. And now they've made it, he goes to church, she goes to church. How could a Christian vote for Donald Trump when he's on his third marriage? None of that matters. You as an educated voter, you want to vote based on policy, and the Bible tells you which policies come from the Antichrist spirit. And unfortunately, it's not going to play out for the betterment of society. The Bible doesn't say everything's going to come under a one world ruler and one world government and everything's going to end in peace and harmony. It's going to be the bane of civilization. It's going to be the destruction of the world. So when you see a politician that exhibits the desire to have those policies in place, you're not dealing with somebody that's operating in the spirit of God. You're seeing somebody that's operating in a destructive spirit, and you want to avoid them.
Look, I admit to being, fairly new to my spiritual journey. I used to think that the Bible was a book of fables, and because of many cases the antiquated language, I had trouble understanding parts of it. Actually, one of the Bibles you gave me, has been very helpful, because I came to learn that the Bible is an extraordinarily practical document.
Absolutely.
The answer to everything you want to know is there if you just know where to look. In the beginning, I started with Psalms and Proverbs, and they're pretty straightforward and pretty easy to understand. I've had, at least four, perhaps five miracles in my own life in a very short period of time. So it is, I commend it. Anybody says to me, aren't you concerned about this upcoming election? Aren't you worried about it? What's your strategy? I'm a pretty hard-boiled political operative. I've worked for 4 presidents. I've been in 700 campaigns for offices at all levels. But when I tell them that prayer is a central part of my strategy, well, some folks look at me a little funny, but I must say, and I think you would agree with this, there's an awakening going on in America today. It's profound, it's spreading, it's growing, it's powerful, and that's why I'm still optimistic. Not on a partisan basis, because I don't see this as an election between Republicans and Democrats or liberals and conservatives. I see this as nothing less than an epic struggle between light and dark, between good and evil, between the godly and the godless. And frankly, I think if we fail, America will step off into 1,000 years of darkness.
That's true. It's a very important time to be alive. Our involvement in politics matters, because the one thing the Bible is clear about, it says when the righteous rule, the people rejoice, but when the wicked rule, there's sorrow. And it says righteousness exalts a nation, but sin brings a curse on the people. So nobody wants their nation cursed. And I like what you said about prayer, because a lot of times when you get around Christians, they're very fatalistic. Well, I think God's angry with America, God's going to judge us for our sin. But that's not what the Bible shows you that even when God was upset with a nation, his answer wasn't to wipe it off the face of the map. His answer was to raise up people to tell the people the word of God and build faith in them. And he said, if my people that are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. And he didn't say I'll just revive them. I'll heal their land. I'll revive their nation. So it's a worthy thing to pray for America, because I know for sure God's not finished with America. The best days of America are not behind it. And just like people predicted in 2020, if Joe Biden gets in, the country can't last 4 years under his leadership. Yet here we are. We made it through, and now we have a chance to turn things in the right direction. And I think God's going to give us a window of opportunity to see America go on the up and up and answer our prayers.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to evangelist John Shuttlesworth of the Revival Today Ministry, and we'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show. This is the Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show, and we're talking to my friend, evangelist John Shuttlesworth. John, I got to ask you a personal question. Do you ever sleep? Because I follow you pretty religiously on social media, and you are always on the go.
What did Tom Hagen say when Al Pacino asked him if he slept? I slept on the plane. I don't fly the plane, so I sleep there.
Your level of energy is impressive, to say the least. You have been critical of evangelicals for Harris. It's almost an oxymoron in a strange way. Can you tell us about that?
Well, when I saw that launched, I don't like dishonesty. It's like if you don't uphold Christian values, that's fine. You don't have to. It's a free country. But don't pretend that you do. So if you're going to call yourself Evangelicals for Harris, I have some questions I want answered, and they won't answer them. Do you believe Jesus Christ is the only way to heaven? Any evangelical believes that. They won't answer that because they don't. So you can appeal to evangelicals, but don't make it seem like there's some groundswell of evangelical support for Kamala Harris, because it's not true.
Yes, indeed. Now, there's a lot of controversy about President Trump's position on life. His position is reflected in the Republican National Platform. I myself was once pro-choice or pro-abortion. As a libertarian, I thought that an individual had the right to make a decision about their own body. That ended when my great-grandson was born, and I realized how precious he was and how completely wrong I was. And I've become very strongly pro-life. There would be no abortion if it were up to me, but I'm also a political realist. And I think the president has taken a pro-life position. He is the most pro-life president in our history. He appointed the three justices who were integral to overturning Roe v. Wade, which returns this decision to the states where he has always believed it belonged. Yet I see people on TV, his critics, saying he handpicked these jurists and they have planned for years. Well, of course he handpicked them. Every president handpicks his Supreme Court appointments. And yeah, they do share a certain judicial philosophy on these issues. They make it sound nefarious or something.
Right. As if there's some completely neutral judge that you could appoint who just hears every case with no bias.
But were you happy with the way not happy is acceptable, I guess is the way I should say it, with the way the national platform came out?
Well, here's what people need to wake up to, particularly evangelicals and Catholics and Christians, is Donald Trump's not running against Jesus Christ. He's running against Kamala Harris. So whatever you do or don't like about his abortion position, If you don't think Trump's pro-life enough, do you think he's more pro-life than his opposition? Because those are your two choices. So like you said, with political strategy, if the only thing in the polls that Kamala Harris has to go against Trump on is that he's going to make abortion illegal, he's going to completely invade your reproductive rights, yeah, it makes sense to not make yourself seem like Benito Mussolini when it comes to reproductive rights and soften a little bit. But who cares what people say? When it comes to action, like you said, I'm 43. Every Republican that ever ran for anything said they were going to overturn Roe versus Wade. They never did. Trump got it done. So now because you think he's not hardline enough on his comments, that outdoes his actual action? Would you like another normal Republican candidate that's going to promise you the world when it comes to pro-life and deliver nothing? Trump delivered, so back off.
I must tell you my greatest concern at this time, in all honesty, having read Samuel 1 and 2, specifically Samuel 1, sections or verses 15 and 16, the story of the two kings, if it is apocryphal, if Saul is Joe Biden, an illegitimate king, a king who the Lord took his kingdom away from him because he disobeyed God, and David was the good king. Had David been killed by Saul, Saul tried 3 times to kill David, but he failed. Had David not survived, the whole trajectory of the Bible, the whole story of the Bible would be different. I pray hard against another attack on President Donald Trump. This is, candidly, my single greatest fear.
Yeah, because there's obviously people that are in power that are happy to see him not protected. He needs prayer.
I must tell you, look, I've known him for 45 years. He's a different person. He really is. He fully understands that his life was spared for a purpose. He has a new confidence about him, a new serenity, a new sureness that his life has been spared for a specific purpose. I've known him 45 years. He's still the same Donald Trump, but he clearly understands what happened here. But for the turn of his head at exactly the right time, he would not be with us. And he understands that this is the Lord's work. It's why I think he's empowered in a way, and why he is more determined, more resilient than ever before. Jonathan, you are headed to the Dwelling Place Church in Millville, New Jersey. You'll be there at 7:00 tonight to preach the word of the Lord. I want to thank you so much for giving us your time. It's never, ever long enough when I have you, but we're going to get you back as soon as we possibly can. God bless you. God bless your wife. God bless all those hardworking people at the Revival Today ministry. You're doing an amazing job spreading the word of the Lord.
Thanks for being my friend, Mr. Stone. Have a great afternoon.
God bless you, my friend. Welcome back, folks. If you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. Joining me now is Arnie Steinberg. He is a contributing editor to The American Spectator. He's the author of a great book, Whiplash, From JFK to Donald Trump. He is, to my mind, one of the most brilliant and I think creative, strategic thinkers in the Republican Party. He knows New York State well, having been one of the principal architects of James L. Buckley's 1970 election to the U.S. Senate as a minor party candidate, which has happened very, very seldom in our American history. And he has written an incredible piece for The Spectator, which is in the form of a memo to President Donald Trump with advice before this upcoming debate. Now, I think this debate is going to be positively crucial in this race. That's not always the case, but this is going to be as important as the 1960 debate between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy was, as important as the debate between President Jimmy Carter and then Governor Ronald Reagan was. Arnie Steinberg, thank you so much for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger. In full disclosure, you and I go back over a half century of that 1970 Buckley campaign and subsequently. And I think there's a few people that know Donald Trump better than you personally, having some insight. So I think we've got kind of an interesting combination for a dialogue here today.
Well, I'm delighted to have you. This debate, as you said to me off air, is going to be vitally important. So let's lay this out. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think it's going to be important for two reasons. One is the sort of the substantive one, the perception one. And as you and I know from debates, what's often as important or more important than a debate is the pickup, what the headline is, what people see who don't watch the debate and they see 30-second clip or whatever. And that's what President Trump has to bear in mind. You mentioned Kennedy Nixon. People should understand, especially the younger people who weren't around, is that Kennedy won the debate on television, Nixon won the debate on radio. And that shows that, as Arthur Finkelstein, an old friend of ours who's passed away, once said, perception is reality. And so what is the perception that people are going to have about this debate? The technical reason why it's important is because of COVID, we started this early voting trend, which is continuing there. And so people are going to start voting very early. And so to the extent that this debate affects them, to state the obvious, somebody who votes early has a voter propensity, a voter probability of 100%. And, one of the challenges of polling is that when I did a lot of polling before I left doing that work professionally, we used to account for people who already had voted. We would ask them questions, and we would have a mathematical way of figuring them in, because the people who have voted, as I said, are going to, in effect, be certain voters there. So as you get closer and closer to election, it becomes more and more important how many people already have voted versus how many people are left for grabs. So those are the two principal reasons. And looking at this debate, we have the situation where most people advise a candidate, be yourself. I watched the Reagan movie last night, and Nancy Reagan stopped the briefing of Ronald Reagan debating, and they said, you're just giving a bunch of numbers. Let him just be himself. And so here, you want Donald Trump to be himself. You want him to be authentic, and yet you want him to do what works. And what is the constituency? What is the target group? Well, we know his base is motivated, and we know her base is motivated. So this is not a guy who has to crank out his people to turn out to vote because the election is important. He has to concentrate on those states that are going to determine the electoral vote, which will be dispositive of the election, and probably a bit of an expanded number than the usual, but basically the battleground states. So even though it's a national audience, he has to speak to those states. And who are the voters that are going to determine that? It's going to be the voters who are declined to stay independent, or the squishy Democrats who might switch, or the squishy Republicans who need to come back to the fold. And my contention is that what reaches the independent voters will reach the squishy Dems and the squishy Reaps. And basically, I think you have technical reasons as to why the former president needs to be effective, and you have the substantive reasons. The technical reasons are age-old and apply to every debate in the last 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years, which is he should be prepared for every possible attack against him. There should be no surprises there. So he doesn't have to be briefed on a bunch of numbers and statistics that are going to overwhelm him there. But there's so many possible attacks against him that could be disposed of in one or two sentences without a dialogue. He loses when he has a dialogue on his perceived negatives there. He wins when he has a dialogue on her perceived negatives and expands on them. So I think that's very, very important. It really bothers me when I see a candidate who I support in a debate and express surprise and amazement and suddenly floored by some obvious attack against him. So let's just say the most obvious ones will be the ones that are recent. Tucker Carlson had a controversial guest that said some things about Churchill and World War II and so on. That might be asked about how he feels there. So he has to be prepared for a 1 or 2 sentence reply to dispose of it. So that's an area. Second, he should understand that it isn't any specific Kamala position that's at issue, although some are very compelling against her. It's the idea of credibility and trust. And so he needs to take the low-hanging fruit on what she's most vulnerable on. For example, that in the last CNN interview, in fact, the only interview she's done since she was nominated, she said that her position on fracking was made clear in a 2020 debate that she supported it. Flatly untrue, and the CNN fact-checker actually said that. So he needs to bring that up. And then he needs to ask her questions generally that she can't possibly answer, such as, and now you maintain your for fracking. What fracking programs would you approve in Pennsylvania? How much fracking would you approve? When would they start? How many years would they go for? The kinds of things where she will be floored by those questions because she can't possibly answer them. And then pivot to an attack against her, but that is not seen as a personal attack. And the language used is not personal; it's seen as clinical. For example, after he says, the reason why you have flip-flopped about your position on fracking, and then told CNN you had that position in 2020, they fact-checked and said that wasn't the case, is because you want to carry Pennsylvania. It's a battleground state, and it's pivotal for you to try to get elected. Now, if you wanted to carry Pennsylvania, you should have selected Governor Shapiro to be your running mate. But the media, and not just one media, but numerous columnists and numerous commentators, including CNN, speculated you didn't do it because the man is Jewish. There. Now, the fact is you picked a governor who's more radical than you, and your two-state solution to the Middle East is Minnesota and Michigan. You're compromising the national security and foreign policy of the United States for political reasons. So that's the way you put a lot of stuff there, and then you're forcing the moderators to turn to her for a response that she's going to have problems doing with. So these are, some of the kinds of things I'd like to see. And, of course, in the real world, while we're doing this interview, and yesterday and 2 days ago and the rest of today and tomorrow, a lot of stuff should be thrown at her so she walks in the debate on defense. So I'm still hoping that maybe they're going to come out with some good, solid attacks by surrogates or President Trump, or information leaked that when she's walking into that debate, she's already feeling tension and stress because she's going to have to respond to something that's contemporary in real time within the last 48 hours of the debate.
Yeah, I think her largest single problem is how do you present yourself as a change agent? How do you talk about, as she does, taking us in a new direction when she has been up front in the administration that brought us to where we are today with the highest gas prices in recent history, with epic inflation, with rising crime, a fentanyl epidemic, and on the verge of World War III in two different theaters. How does she just walk away and say, "Oh, that was Joe Biden's fault"? I don't know how she gets away with that.
Yeah, and this is the point I raised in the column. Is I think this is such a blatant, obvious issue that he must confront it directly and state that in less technical terms than you and I have been involved in campaigns. Simply to say, you're trying to do a magic act here. You're a Camille. You're trying to turn the tables, and you basically are the surrogate here for President Biden. The reason he's not running is the power brokers, the Democratic Party, ran him out of the race within 48 hours of his saying to do it. They pushed you in. They claim to be there for democracy. But the fact of the matter is that you were the first to drop out 4 years ago. You didn't get a single delegate. You didn't have an open convention now. And they're trying to redo reality there. And we're doing the movie here. We're doing the Kamala Harris movie, and the voters are not going to go to the movies, and they're not going to buy these the tickets to this movie there. You are continuation of the same and worse, and then he needs to get into the economy very boldly and tie them both to the cost of living.
One of the things you say in your very perceptive memo, which you can find at the American Spectator, is that this is the year that the vice presidential debate could actually matter. Expand on that.
Yes. Well, most times in recent political history, although there's been a lot of talk, it turns out that generally the vice presidential nominee is sort of a neutral, neither a positive nor a negative. They're just there. And it's more of a risk-averse situation. The presidential nominee picks somebody that he thinks won't do any harm, like the Hippocratic oath of politics there. But the fact of the matter is that I truly believe, not because I would prefer Trump over her, I truly believe she made an error in picking this guy. I think he comes across as a snake oil salesman. They're thinking, well, here's this guy who's supposed to coach, the guy who's in the National Guard. He's from Middle America and so on. And I think their analysis is wrong. I think that, when I saw him the other day, and hopefully Vance will bring this up, where he was at the fair answering all kinds of questions, and somebody said to him, a reporter asked him, well, what about the hostages that were just killed in Israel, the Americans? And he just turned away and walked away. I can understand somebody briefing a candidate and saying, stay away from policy. We're still working on things there. Don't do anything controversial. But the fact is, what President Trump should say is, you have no heart. You have no soul there about her choice of the vice president there. And this is what Vance should say. You couldn't even, when you were asked about an American citizen who was murdered in cold blood, you couldn't just come up to a microphone and say, I'm so distressed. I'm so sad. I'm so moved by the fact that we have lost an American and so on there. And where Vance has to basically say that this guy has no humanity. And many of these conservatives and Republicans fail to connect emotionally, just like their advertising doesn't. So I feel this guy is very vulnerable, and I think some of his lies are so visceral. For example, the drunk driving situation where the guy's going 95 miles per hour in a 45 or 50 zone, doesn't pass the sobriety test, doesn't pass the blood test, is put in jail, and then his campaign says it was all a misunderstanding there. People can relate to that, and what Vance has to say is, we all make mistakes, we all admit mistakes, and years later you said it there, but there's something wrong with your integrity when you can do this sort of thing. There's something wrong when you say you were in a war carrying the weapons of war, and you say it was a grammatical mistake.
All right, we have to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Republican strategist extraordinaire Arnie Steinberg.
This is the Roger Stone Show. This is the Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back. This is the Roger Stone Show, and we're talking to Arnie Steinberg, to my mind, one of the most brilliant and creative Republican strategists in the country today. We are longtime friends, full disclosure. He's the author of Whiplash, From JFK to Donald Trump, and we're talking about what could be the most consequential presidential debate in American history coming up Tuesday night. He's written a brilliant memo to President Trump as a public document at the American Spectator. Let us continue. One of the things that I really agree with here in your memo, Arnie, is that the president must avoid making what appears to be personal attacks on his opponent. Pointing out
he should attack her in a way that seems comparative, and then always in a positive way, looking toward the future. And he should turn everything around. You say you're from the politics of joy. And what's joyful about the cost of living? What's joyful about all the migrants coming in and disrupting public services there? And what he needs to say is that some people say, Madam Vice President, that we should ask the question: are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Pretty much everybody knows they're worse off. I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to say to you that the people who voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020 would vote for Donald Trump again. The people who voted for Joe Biden, who you say was this consequential, wonderful president there, he had a tremendous rate of desertion, voters who felt that they were screwed over there. And so my question is, for the people watching, if you vote for Donald Trump or you vote for Kamala Harris, who's going to have buyer's remorse after this election? Who's going to look back and say, my God, I voted on an untested Kamala Harris who was basically slavish to Joe Biden, said Bidenomics was terrific there. But when we know there's a direct line between the Biden-Harris economic policies and the massive, unprecedented increase in the cost of living, that's a permanent increase in the cost of living there. If you say inflation is going down, we're not going to return to the prior price level. You have destroyed the feeling of parents that the expectations that their children will have a better life, and as President of the United States, I'm going to have a tremendous challenging undertaking to reverse the angst and anxiety and stress and tension in our country that you and Joe Biden have caused.
Let me ask you this, Arnie. Do you think it is a legitimate issue for the debate and for the campaign that the day after Donald Trump's debate with Joe Biden, in which I thought Trump was extraordinarily disciplined, lived within disadvantageous rules for him, stuck to his hammering of Biden on his record, do you think it is a legitimate issue that the day after the debate, Kamala Harris was telling us that Joe Biden was sharp as a tack and he just had an off night?
Absolutely. I think he needs to turn it into credibility and say this was a bait and switch situation there. And you're the same person who was saying this person is consequential. He's a genius behind closed doors. And we all know that under my administration we had peace and prosperity, and under this administration we have war and economic disaster. And everybody on television, do they believe what they see or do they believe what you told them, Kamala, there? And how is it that things switch so quickly? I think it's legitimate because people have to feel they can trust the chief executive of this country there, and you have come to this nomination under the most questionable circumstances.
This is going to be very interesting. Do you think we'll have more than one debate?
I think it's going to depend on the outcome. I think if she doesn't do well, she may ask for another debate. And I don't know what former President Trump's strategy is on this. I hope he can score some home runs. I mean, I hope he can say, you claim to be a prosecutor. A prosecutor doesn't prosecute. A prosecutor seeks.
All right, we have a hard out, unfortunately. I want to thank my friend, Arnie Steinberg. God bless you, my friend. I'm Roger Stone. We'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
I'm Roger Stone, and I'm here with Paul Stone, who is the founder and CEO of Colonial Metals Group. Paul, I've been in American politics for 45 years. I've seen booms and busts, but I've never been more apprehensive about the economy than today. I've been following your Substack, and what I like about it is you recognize that past is prologue. If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, then look what has happened economically in the past. Mm-hmm. I was particularly interested in your analysis of the subprime mortgage fiasco, which we seem to be on the cusp of actually trying yet again. At least one of the presidential candidates wants to recycle this disastrous program. Talk to us about that.
Well, it's just when let's say we fertilize the garden, right? The weeds get fertilized too. Weeds typically grow faster than the crop you're trying to benefit from. So when the government's allowed to print money or create programs like fractional lending, if a financial institution is strapped to making solid loans because that's their own money, and they have to be judicious about how they release those funds, it's because the lending institution might suffer something terrible if the loans aren't repaid. So when Clinton is thinking it would be nice if people without perfect credit to own a home, it's a wonderful idea. Of course, it's an impactful effect if more homeowners own the ground they're sleeping on for the neighborhood, the block they live on. If we could just help more people own those homes, how do we do that? And I suppose the idea was, well, let's let lending institutions lend out 10 times the amount of money they actually have. But that's printing money. That's money from out of thin air. That's a creek turning into a flood. And eventually when the resource you're drawing on, the dollar itself, ends up at zero. I mean, currently today it's toilet paper with a face on it. But when it's at zero, then all of that financial wind, that artificial wind that's been blowing into asset values goes away. And then maybe no one owns a home. Then our expectations are ruined. So when we look at these busts, people call them bubbles, they can only form when there's excess or a falsehood source of capital pouring into a trapped asset.
It's interesting. As you know, I've written 2 books on Richard Nixon, and I recognize some of his great accomplishments, ending the war in Vietnam, strategic arms limitation agreement with the Soviets, but closing the gold window, taking us off the gold standard, that seems to me to be the beginning of our money being backed by nothing, being
Absolutely.
backed by air.
Right, right. And now, if no new money had been introduced artificially, we wouldn't have the problems we have today, and the government payroll for the year wouldn't be $1.4 trillion because there wouldn't be that money in existence to have the government grow to this ridiculous size. Leaving the gold standard, though, we don't necessarily have to blame it on Nixon, although he was the one who allowed something to go forward. Europe, the European countries had realized that we weren't as fundamentally sound as we said we were, or messaged out to the world that we were, and they were starting to make noise about wanting their gold back. They had shifted their gold to the United States so we could consider it ours and backing our dollar, which allowed us to expand the money supply without ruining the dollar. If they want their gold back, our house of cards falls apart. So he meets in Camp David with a few of his advisors for a few days, and then he decides this is where you can put that responsibility on his shoulders. He does decide, in a disgusting fashion, in my opinion, breaking into an episode of Bonanza. So we're distracted, interrupts Bonanza, the greatest TV show at the time on air, I think on a Friday, August 15th, 1971, and lets us know that gold has nothing to do with our money anymore. And by that time, I don't even know if people were really aware that gold still had anything to do with our money, right? But that limit on the government from growing past the size we wanted it to be was destroyed, and now the government has interfered in our lives by printing of money because they're causing the cost of everything to rise so ridiculously high, and wages aren't going up with that. So we're drowning, and the American family is destroyed, and moms are forced into the workforce, and latchkey kids is created, and now we got all this misery and chaos and envy and jealousy all over the place. When we've lost sight of how magical a human being is. It's a magical creation. And we're so distracted thinking we're just components in some gerbil wheel that makes the machine go and pleases the government.
Interestingly enough, Arthur Burns, who was Nixon's chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, adamantly opposed to leaving the gold standard. It was John Connally, former governor of Texas, famously wounded with John F. Kennedy, then Treasury Secretary, who persuaded Nixon not only to abandon the gold standard, but also to impose wage and price controls. Something else we're talking about again. How did that work out last time?
When does any government rent control or artificial limit set on something ever work out? Like rent control, yeah, you might be there 20 years. It's $250 a month for rent. In a corresponding apartment, might be $3,500 a month for rent, and you get to live in your place for that cheap rent. But the building is dying around you because the landlord can't continue to make enough money off the renters to fix the building up and keep it nice. Whatever the government idea is, so here's the thing. The government should not be orchestrating anything. They should be facilitating what we want or need them to do. And that's it. If they're the ones curating an experience, we've lived long enough to understand it's just garbage. It's painful and it's garbage and it's destructive.
It's also interesting to me that the official statistics that the government puts out, in almost all instances, when you look very carefully, they're cooked.
They're massage numbers. And then they go back and revise them. But they get the soundbite of how awesome the number is when everyone's going, on Friday, the Fed is going to put out some number. Okay, we're all listening. What's the number? They tell us the number. That gets stored in our memory. A month later, they revise them. We're like, someone made a mistake. Or we barely even hear it. We hear the first sound, right? You make an impression, a lasting impression in 15 seconds. And then it's hard to dispel us hearing or unring that bell to correct it later.
Yeah,
it's all hooey.
Yeah, they tell us we've created 818,000 new jobs. Then they revise it down to 600,000 new jobs. But when you look even closer, most of those are part-time jobs, and the actual hours worked per American has dropped dramatically.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, wages have remained flat.
Right.
Wage growth has been almost non-existent.
Right. And when people can understand just how disgusting that is, the government is pumping air into the cost of living prices. So the cost for you to be here keeps rising, but your wages don't. So are you getting an 8% raise a year in your job? Probably not. But that's, based off the last few decades, what the cost of living has been going up by. So I call that drowning. Most of this flood has drowned people out. Many people are benefiting from it, but most are not. I would say 60-70% of the people in this country are struggling mightily because of the government's ideas. Reagan said it best. Their solutions are worse than their problems. So imagine that for 50 years off the gold standard where they can print, we got a problem. Here's another 100 billion. Here's another 50 billion. Here's another trillion. And they just reach behind them into some drawer that never runs out of money. And mathematically, they could print money until it's worth 1/100 of a penny. And it might cost $50 for a coffee. Mathematically, they can do that forever. I could eat half a Snickers bar today, half tomorrow, half the next day, and never run out of Snickers bar until I'm splitting atoms. But it didn't satisfy my hunger after a while.
What really disturbs me is that we now seem to be hell-bent on going towards a digital monetary system. So, like, the government would give you a plastic card. They would control your money. When you went to buy groceries or, say, gasoline, they'd have to approve that sale. So, theoretically, if they didn't like the church you were donating to or the party you belong to or the charitable contributions, they could
Yes.
They could deny your sales.
Yes, absolutely.
You wouldn't control your own money.
Nope. Yep. You would bypass Congress. So executive order, you could put a moratorium. If you're using our money, you can't purchase ammo or weapons for 6 months until, we take a look at some things. Well, you put ammo and gun makers out of business. By the time it gets to the Supreme Court, what's there to fight over? Because you are now swiping using government-issued property and government-issued currency at that terminal. And as that transaction runs to get approved electronically, there could already be a setting in place where it declines that. Or it could be monitoring how often you buy red meat. We all know that red meat eaters are helping destroy the climate. So they can curtail the demand for red meat. They can curtail the production of it. They can manage and monitor carbon output by how often they let you consume things that are negative, in their opinion, on creating carbon output. It's literally the last thing that's left to manage all of us idiots out here in the real world that are producing the revenue and creating the jobs ourselves that they want to benefit from.
Paul Stone, founder and chief executive officer of the Colonial Metals Group. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Absolutely. Thank you, Roger. It's a blessing.
God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Folks, check that out. Go to colonialmetals.com/stone for a free consultation on how you can diversify your portfolio and to begin to protect your retirement by using precious metals. I think you'll be glad you did. A lot of people have seen this story about an academic, Dr. Alan Lichtman, who claims that he has been correct on 9 out of the 10 national presidential elections, who now says that based on his model that Kamala Harris will win. And the media are kind of grabbing this and running with it. So I had to take a look at it to find out whether he's wrong. And the answer is no. As a matter of fact, the only one he's gotten right were the ones that a blind pig could have figured out. But in the close elections, he's actually gotten them wrong. So, for example, he said that Al Gore would win. He predicted that Gore would win. And then afterwards, he blamed the process by which George Bush won as the reason why his prediction was wrong. He also said that he that Donald Trump would not win in 2016, and once again he was wrong. I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show, and I'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
And we're back. This is Roger Stone. We were talking about Dr. Alan Lichtman, who has claimed that he has accurately predicted, I guess it was 9 out of the last 10 presidential elections based on his model. But when you dig into this, he's based his model solely on the popular vote. Now, we all know that American presidents are not elected on the popular vote, which is why, in the end, he predicted that Trump would lose the popular vote. Then he only changed his prediction after Trump won the Electoral College vote. Very clever. But the analysis in his book really doesn't hold up to these numbers. If you're concerned about his prediction, I would not be concerned. But it's interesting the way the mainstream media grabbed this prediction and ran with it. The other thing I saw this week with the new movie Reagan is out with Dennis Quaid. I confess to you, I haven't seen it yet, but I hear great things about it. I, of course, worked for Ronald Reagan in 1976, 1980, and 1984. Spent a great deal of time with him. Now, Chris Wallace, formerly of Fox, formerly of CNN, said in an interview that, he didn't think Reagan would have liked Donald Trump.
A lot of people say that there would be no room for Ronald Reagan in Donald Trump's Republican Party. Reagan confronted the Russians. He talked, and you in the movie talk about an evil empire. Trump doesn't do that. Reagan supported free trade. Trump imposes tariffs. And Reagan's 11th commandment was, thou shalt not speak ill of another Republican. I got to say, I think Reagan would have been appalled by Trump's behavior.
Here's the problem, Chris. Since the only two times Ronald Reagan and Chris Wallace were together, I was there since I introduced them in the 1979-1980 period. Ronald Reagan loved Donald Trump because he represented entrepreneurship, free enterprise, and he would always put America first. So with all due respect, I think you proved it when you moderated a debate. Somewhere along the line, things went askance. Your father, Mike Wallace, was a great and fair journalist. He was a great friend of the Reagans, but he covered them fairly. You, my friend, have become a partisan. It's quite sad. I also interesting to say that I think this new coalition of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And Donald Trump has with it the potential for the forging of a new American majority. Let's listen to RFK.
You talked when you went up on stage a little while back about making America healthy again, and he's deputizing you. And you're going to make America healthy again. So when you get in there, if Donald Trump is fortunate enough to be reelected, how are you going to strangle the food industry so that it can't poison the children? And how are you going to strangle the pharmaceutical industry so it can't poison the people? I mean, that is not going to be easy. What's your plan?
No, it's not going to be easy. But, you know, the regulatory agencies were set up to do exactly that. And now they're doing exactly the opposite. And, I've litigated on these issues, Jesse, against NIH, against CDC, against FDA. When you litigate against these agencies, you get a PhD in corporate capture and how to unravel it. And I understand exactly what we need to do. We need to take the $42 billion budget of NIH, which is now being used to incubate new pharmaceutical products to treat chronic disease. And instead, we need to figure out what's causing it. We need to name names. We need to say, whether it's high fructose corn syrup is linked to the obesity epidemic, establish the science behind that. And once we have a good science out there, the litigators come in and we'll solve the problem.
This to me has great, great, great promise. Back in April of last year, I wrote a column in which I advocated rather wistfully a Trump-Kennedy ticket. This is a recognition at the time that the Democrat Party structure was going to kneecap RFK the way they did Bernie Sanders. They were never going to give him an honest, fair shot at that nomination. They essentially canceled the Iowa caucuses. They penalized New Hampshire's Democrat Party, saying that if they had the primary, which, by the way, is required by state law, they would be stripped of their delegates. They told RFK that if he didn't hit a certain threshold, he would not be allowed on the ballot in future primaries. And then, sadly, I was disappointed to see him run as an independent, having bolted the Republican Party myself in 2012 when they nominated Mitt Romney, a man I recognized believed in nothing whatsoever other than the enrichment of Mitt Romney and his friends. I had supported the Libertarian Party candidate for president, Governor Gary Johnson, helped him get on the ballot, and it was extraordinary in two senses. One, the laws that are written that regulate how you get on the ballot are written by Republicans and Democrats working together to make sure they don't have any competition. But even worse, the mainstream media subjects you to a complete blackout. So the fact that RFK was saying some of the most interesting, some of the most constructive, some of the most provocative things in this presidential campaign, he couldn't get covered anyplace. They tried to pretend he didn't exist. And then the Democrat Party once again swept in with their tsunami of lawfare to keep him off the ballot. Sounds to me like Donald Trump agrees with me.
You know, Bobby, RFK Jr., that was a meaningful endorsement. That was a great endorsement. We'll take on the corruption at the FDA, the CDC, World Health Organization, and other institutions of public health that have dominated and really are dominated by corporate power and dominated really by China.
There it is, folks. It's time to make America healthy again. Thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Holiday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Holiday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Holiday. Holiday, bring it on.
Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku. And it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome, I'm Roger Stone, and you're here at 77 WABC Radio. We are the crown jewel of AM radio, the most powerful, influential AM radio station in the United States of America. It's my great privilege to be at the 77 WABC Gala this past Friday night, where we were raising money for the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, the Police Athletic League, and also the St. Francis Feed the Hungry Project, as well as celebrating the birthday of John Catsimatidis, who, of course, does the great Katz and Cosby show here every Sunday morning to set the table for that day, but every day at 5. You don't want to miss that. I did notice on email today, on social media, that Bill de Blasio says that if 1 million people sign up for the Paisans for Harris, I guess it's an online Zoom call, that he will go to the Olive Garden and set a record for the most breadsticks ever eaten. Sorry, Mayor de Blasio. First, your real name is Wilhelm. You do have a little bit of Italian blood, but no real Italian would ever go to the Olive Garden. I know I'm half Italian myself. I'm half Hungarian, half Italian. I'm Italian from the waist down. Okay, so we have now with us as our guest the press secretary for President Donald Trump's campaign. She worked for President Trump in the White House as a presidential writer and assistant press secretary, now working on the president's campaign as his national press secretary. It is our great privilege to join Caroline Levitt to the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's a great privilege to join you on your radio show. I appreciate your having me.
Very pleased to have you because, you work very closely with the president. Now, I've known the president 45 years, but for people who don't know him, he's sometimes hard to explain because he's not only a great boss, but he's a man of enormous stamina, enormous courage, enormous energy, enormous resilience. He's got a wicked sense of humor, often a self-deprecating sense of humor. So a softball question, but what do you find it to be like to work for Donald Trump?
Well, I love the question, and I appreciate the question because I think everyone in America would love Donald Trump if they knew him as well as you do, Roger, and have gotten to work for him like I have. And he is a great boss. Everything you just said about him is true. He truly is one of the funniest people I have ever met. I mean, he has us always laughing out loud, whether we're on the plane or in meetings. He has a sense of humor, and it's really remarkable how he views life, especially in the face of so much adversity since he began this political journey. And he has faced more adversity and challenges and witch hunts and political lawfare than arguably any man that has ever run for president of the United States in our nation's history. Yet he's still positive, and he's still the Energizer Bunny in our campaign. And he has an amazing stamina, as you said. I'm a third of the president's age, I think, maybe a little bit less than that, but still it is difficult for me and my colleagues to keep up with him on this campaign because he works 24/7. And one thing about President Trump as well is he is always the most well-read person in the room. And I try to beat him on that as his press secretary, to try to be more well-read than him, because it's my job as a staffer to be there for him when he doesn't know something. But seldom does he not know the answer to something. He is constantly reading, absorbing the news. And that's why he was such a great president, and he's such a great candidate, because he truly understands the problems of this country, the pain that people are feeling, and he's on top of it at all times. He really is. It's amazing.
I want to remind our listeners, we're going to be taking your phone call shortly. That number is 800-848-9222. That's 800-848-9222. Right now, we're talking to Caroline Levitt with the Trump campaign. By the way, just to be absolutely clear, open invitation to anyone in Kamala Harris's campaign who would like to come on for an interview. We'd be more than happy to interview right here on the Roger Stone Show. I don't think the phone's going to be ringing, but it's an open invitation. So we're going into a debate, and the one thing I do know is that Donald Trump is not and will never be a politician. He's a political leader. He's the leader of a political movement. He is running not because he wants a fancy title or because he wants to ride in Air Force One or he wants a fancy mansion. He ran for president to begin with because he loves his country and he hated to see what was happening to it. He hated to see that we were losing. And that America life was declining, respect for America was declining around the world. Our economy was going into the toilet. We were getting taken by these one-size-fits-all international trade deals, which were great for our trading partners, but not so great for the United States. Mm-hmm. One of the things that really aggravates me is when people say, Joe Biden, for example, Trump's in it for himself. Could you speak about that for a moment?
It's laughable when people say that to me because, as you know, Roger, we've both been to Mar-a-Lago, a beautiful property. I've been on the golf course with President Trump. He enjoys golfing very much. He owns multiple incredible golf courses around this world. And he could be enjoying all of that he and his family have worked so hard to build and enjoy his life. But he has chosen not to. And the man works harder than anyone in politics. He's constantly barnstorming the country. Again, like I said, reading up on the news, doing media interviews. And he doesn't do it for fame or fortune. He's one of the few people in politics that didn't get into it for the profit. In fact, as we know, he donated his government salary during his first term, and he actually lost some of his net worth when he was in office. He's the first modern president to get less rich following serving in the White House. And so I think that speaks volumes about, one, his character, and two, the reason he's doing this and why he's running this campaign. And it truly is, as you said, because he loves this country so much. He loves the people of this country, and he wants to save it from the misery that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have brought to this country over the past 4 years. He launched this second campaign the same reason he launched his campaign in 2016, for the forgotten men and women of America who feel forgotten again under the Biden-Harris regime. And one more thing I would just add to that is that President Trump, like I said, is working around the clock every single day to win this election. And we feel as though now at this state of the race, we have the momentum. He certainly has the money. He's significantly outraised the Democrats for the majority of this race. And we're looking forward to the opportunity on Tuesday for President Trump to use the chance to highlight his record of success with the failures of the past 4 years that Kamala Harris owns.
As you know, he doesn't do your traditional, debate preparation where somebody comes in and pretends to play the role of Kamala Harris and other members of the staff pose as reporters and pepper him with conventions. He doesn't do it that way. He does it his way. But I have a feeling he'll be extraordinarily well prepared. How's that process going?
He is extraordinarily well prepared, just like he was with his knockout debate with Joe Biden on CNN. And as you said, the president doesn't do the traditional prep with the mock debate with a stand-in actor pretending to be Kamala. He does meetings with policy advisors, with those that he trusts, to freshen up on the issues, if you will, to talk about what the latest that's happening, whether it's at the southern border or with our economy, and to think about how he can offensively go on offense against Kamala Harris for her record. And that's one of the things he's been doing is, of course, looking at Kamala Harris's record, not just as vice president, which we know has been a complete abysmal failure, but also in her time as Attorney General of California, in her time as this very radical liberal district attorney from San Francisco. There's a lot to unpack in Kamala Harris's long career of being a career politician. She's made some really bad decisions. She's let some very violent criminals out on bail. She's been weak on crime her entire career. She was the most liberal senator in this country. She supported some of the most radical policies this country has ever seen, like Medicare for all and getting rid of private health insurance, a ban on fracking, which would be devastating to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and so many other states that depend on our energy industry in this country. And Kamala Harris, as we know, has zero foreign policy experience or military experience, aside from being Joe Biden's co-partner in the terrible withdrawal from Afghanistan that led 13 service members to be killed. So there is a lot to go on offense with against Kamala Harris on Tuesday night. She has yet to be held accountable or really ask tough questions. She has not done a single solo sit-down interview, nor has she held a solo press conference. And so she is hiding away this whole weekend, having her advisors memorize talking points into her brain. But as we've seen in debates of the past, that is not enough to debate Donald Trump. So he will be ready. He will be well prepared and well read on Kamala Harris's record and ready to hold her accountable, which is something, unfortunately, the mainstream media has yet to do in this race.
I have been extraordinarily impressed with former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. She's incredibly articulate. This is a woman who was a four-term Democrat congresswoman, once vice chairman of the Democrat Committee, National Democrat Committee, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, served her country with distinction as a combat veteran in both Kuwait and Iraq. And she has given up on the Democrat Party. She's written a great book about it, Leaving the Democrat Party Behind. I saw a great interview with her, and she, I think, had it right on the money. She said, look, Donald Trump doesn't need help in practicing a debate. He's a championship debater. That's not where I can help him. Where I can help him is I know her and I know her record. Right. And I think that was perfectly put. But beyond that, I think that she becomes an important bridge for independents and Democrats who don't want to vote for Kamala Harris, may have had some trepidation or hesitation about voting for Donald Trump. But now, with the support of Robert Kennedy and the support of Tulsi Gabbard, I think this is a large plus. We got about 2 minutes before the break. Tell me how you feel about that.
I agree with you completely, and we're so excited to have Tulsi Gabbard on the team. She is a very effective communicator and a well-respected thought leader in this country. She's a critical thinker. We need more people like her. She has an extraordinary following. There's thousands, millions of Americans who respect her very much, and I do believe it's going to make a difference on November 5th. And I'll tell you, the Democrats certainly know it's going to make a difference, and that's why on the press team of our campaign, we have seen a flurry of incoming from the fake news Washington Post, the fake news New York Times, writing hit pieces about Tulsi Gabbard. And that tells you even the Democrats in the fake news know that she's effective and that her joining President Trump officially as part of this team is going to be very hurtful ultimately to Kamala Harris. So to your audience, I know they know better, but when you start reading some of these very nasty stories about Tulsi Gabbard that may come out this week and in the coming weeks, just know they're only being fueled by the Democrat Party, who are threatened by her support of President Trump. And we are so proud to have her on our team.
Yeah, it's entirely based on the fact that she doesn't want the killing to continue in Ukraine. Therefore, she must be a Russian agent. Absolutely ridiculous. Look, this is a simple trade. They can have Dick Cheney. They can have Liz Cheney. They can have Adam Kinzinger. We'll take Robert F. Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard every time. All right, I'm talking to Caroline Levitt of the Trump campaign, and we'll be right back.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back. This is the Roger Stone Show. Folks, I ask you to go to the App Store on your cell phone right now and download the 77 WABC radio app so you can listen to all of the great programming, both talk and entertainment, that we have here on the most dynamic AM radio station in the United States today, 77 WABC. We're talking to Caroline Levitt. She is the press secretary for President Donald Trump's campaign for president. And we've been talking a wide range of subjects. I saw a piece in the UK Daily Mail, still scratching my head about this, about alleged infighting inside the Trump campaign. Yet when I read the story, virtually nobody mentioned in the story had any official capacity in the campaign at all. I've been in 13 national presidential campaigns. And I've seen this one up close. This is the best run, best strategized, best budgeted, best thought out, most cohesive campaign I've seen in my entire political career. So I don't really understand what this is about other than attempting to sow dissension where there really is none.
Mm-hmm. You're 100% right, Roger. Again, the Democrats and the fake news are threatened by the lean, mean machine that President Trump has been running this election cycle, led by Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita. And our campaign leadership runs a tight ship. We all know our roles on this team. Everybody stays in their lane, lends a helping hand to our colleagues when necessary. And we all know who the real leader of the campaign is, and that is President Trump. He leads the direction, and we execute his direction. And I think that's why this has been such a successful campaign, because we all put our own egos aside. And as you know, Roger, there's a lot of egos in politics, but in order to win, it's all about the candidate, and it's about getting that candidate over the finish line and doing what's best for him or for her, in this case, obviously President Trump. And he has some of the best political instincts that I've ever seen anyone, and I'm sure you would agree with that. You have a much longer career in politics than I do, but really watching him up close is incredibly impressive to see just how he knows what to do. His instinct and making decision is always spot on, and he's always looking forward and seeing, and thinking about how things will play out. And oftentimes, pretty much all the time, he turns out to be right. And our campaign team respects that and understands that. And so we let him make the decisions, and then we move forward. And we have, it's easy to run a good campaign when you have a candidate that's willing to work as hard as President Trump. And nobody in politics works harder than him. So I'm proud to be of this team. I'm proud to be a voice for this team. And it's really such a fun time. We have a lot of fun, too, which I think is very important, especially when you're facing witch hunts like we have. A quick story, when President Trump was facing the lawfare from Alvin Bragg in New York, I was there with him through the 6 weeks of trial. My colleagues and I were living in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan for 6 weeks, and it was grueling. We had court every day for 8-9 hours a day, motorcading back and forth to Trump Tower every night, early mornings. But we'd have lunch together as a team, and it was always either McDonald's or pizza. Pretty much that was what's on the menu for 6 weeks straight. But we had a lot of fun, and it was because President Trump, even in the face of being accused of 34 felony counts with no shred of evidence to prove it, was still positive and still optimistic about the campaign and the future of the country. And it's something I'll never forget.
It really aggravates me to see these attacks on Susie Wiles, because I know firsthand Rick Scott would not be in the U.S. Senate without the leadership of Susie Wiles. Donald Trump would not have carried Florida in 2016 without the leadership of Susie Wiles. Ron DeSantis would never have been governor of Florida without the leadership of Susie Wiles. And she identified Callie Means and the importance of making America healthy again. I read a bunch of books on her recommendation before I'd ever heard of Callie Means. Now I'm a true believer. She is one of the most capable women I have ever met in American politics. And this is not to take anything away from Chris LaCivita, who's a superb strategist and mechanic and organizer in his own right. And here's a little secret. I've known campaign pollster Tony Fabrizio since he was 18 years old and I was 24. He is the best in the business. The best in the business. This is the best presidential campaign in modern political history. And those naysayers who claim otherwise, well, they're in for a big surprise the day after the election. Let me ask you about vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance. I was happy with his selection. I note that at 39 years old, he's the exact same age that Richard Nixon was when he was chosen by Dwight Eisenhower to run for vice president. I think J.D. Vance has gotten a bum rap from the fake news media. He's got a 2-year record in the Senate, which is something to be proud of. He is a clear thinker. He is an America First Republican, 100% loyal to the president. And I would predict this to you. His moment in this campaign is going to come. There will be a defining moment in this campaign. Perhaps it's in the debate with Tim Walz. Perhaps it's elsewhere. I think a time is going to come very shortly where he's going to prove to be exactly the right person at exactly the right time for this nomination.
Yeah, I think that's a solid prediction because JD is sharp as a tack. And I do think there will be a moment, too, Roger, where he will shine. And I would like to predict myself it's probably going to be on that debate stage with Tim Walz because Tim Walz is no match for Senator J.D. Vance. And it is sickening to see the way that the media has attacked him and his family. I've gotten to know now Senator Vance's communications director and his press secretary. And now that our teams are fully one, we work together on a daily basis fighting against the fake news press. And I will tell you the hits on him are coming in daily. They are false. The media is digging up, trying to dig up things that don't exist, going to people that he's known his entire life, way back from his childhood. And it's sad to see because he has truly lived the American dream. And you have Tim Walz and Kamala Harris and the Democrats on television disgustingly trying to derail Senator Vance's service to this country and the United States Marine Corps, but also derail him as a blue-collar kid who grew up in poverty in the heartland of this country just because he went to Yale. And I thought that's what this country was supposed to be about, poor kids having that opportunity to go to an Ivy League school, to get a law degree, to become successful, and then, for goodness sake, to be nominated as the vice presidential candidate for the Republican Party. I think it's really, really just sad that the Democrats will chew up and spit out anyone who doesn't think the way that they do, even if they have lived the American dream. And Senator Vance really has lived the American dream. And unlike Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, he is really, really good at sitting down with the media and taking tough questions. He's unafraid. He's fearless, just like President Trump. He'll do any media all the time. And that's part of our effort, is to keep him out there as much as possible, because he speaks eloquently. He's smart. He knows the issues. And he has a real way of connecting with voters on the campaign trail, because he knows their struggles. He grew up with many of them, and he understands it.
I think you're exactly right. I think the attacks on him are born of elitism. They're born of snobbery. They hate the fact that, look, he came from a hard-scrabble background. He came from a very difficult, poor background, and he's the American success story. He didn't get into Yale because he was a legacy, student. He got in through hard work and through academic excellence. He succeeded in business. He has succeeded as an author. He succeeded as a documentary filmmaker. By the way, I've written 5 books. It's not easy to do. And then to have them be a success, that's even harder. And he's already begun a distinguished record in the Senate. And I think he's a perfect fit for Donald Trump in terms of the fact that they both are committed to a non-establishment reform agenda. Now you add Robert Kennedy, who brings an entirely new dimension to the campaign with an important crusade to make our food healthy again, to fight chronic childhood disease. I think we have the makings potentially of an entirely new political majority. The Democrat Party of John F. Kennedy, who was an ardent anti-communist, who was a tax cutter, who believed in a strong national defense, who had a deep suspicion of our intelligence agencies, who favored a silver-backed dollar and sound money. That Democrat Party no longer exists, but those Democrats still exist, and Democrat-leaning independents still exist. So I think this political partnership in which Robert Kennedy has put his own ego aside, he has put his own ambition aside for the good of the country, this is historic. Now you add Tulsi Gabbard and J.D. Vance. We have 4 people who can hit the road for these final days of the campaign, who are stars, every one of them in their own right. The Democrats cannot match this. They have Tim Walz, and I'm not sure what's wrong with that guy, but he just, the way he jumps around, it just looks wacky to me. I don't get it.
Well, he does look very wacky. It's very odd. And RFK Jr., the day that he endorsed President Trump will go down as one of the most epic moments in American politics. You had a Kennedy, to your point, endorsing a Trump. And it's one for the history books. And we're just like Tulsi Gabbard, so excited to have RFK Jr. on the team now. And he brings a diverse background and diverse ideas that I think he and President Trump have talked about. And President Trump is wholeheartedly supportive of RFK bringing those ideas to the ticket and bringing them across the country as he campaigns on behalf of President Trump, namely making America healthy again and ending this epidemic of childhood disease and chronic illness that we have in our country. And he brings up how America is one of the most unhealthy and sick nations in this world. And we shouldn't be, because we're one of the richest nations in this world, and we have advanced science. And but unfortunately, big pharma is a huge problem, as we know. And I think RFK Jr. serves as such a powerful voice. I know as a young woman myself with a new baby, there's so many young moms like me who really appreciate what he's saying in terms of chronic illness, childhood vaccinations, etc. And he speaks to that demographic very powerfully. So he's a great asset to the team as well. And you will see these faces on the campaign trail even more over the next several weeks. In addition to so many of our other great surrogates, we launched our Agenda 47 policy tour last week. So we're going to be utilizing all of these great surrogates and President Trump's friends, his fellow celebrities, some sports figures. We're going to be sending them across the country to the battleground states over the next several weeks to speak to Americans about the issues that matter to them. It's going to be the most extensive surrogate operation that this country has ever seen.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank Carolyn Levitt of the Trump campaign, who is the press secretary for the president's reelection, for spending time with us today. Caroline, thank you so much for being on The Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Folks, I want to remind you, we're going to be taking your calls here in just a few minutes. That number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222, whether it is politics, history, food, fine tailoring, whatever it is you want to talk about, I'm here waiting for your calls, and we'll be right back.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
All right, folks, it's the Stone Zone on the phone section of our program, or you can call us at 800-848-9222. That's 800-848-9222. We have Sal from Staten Island. Sal, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hey, Roger, I think you know who this Sal really is.
Sal Greco, wow.
How are you, Roger? How's everything?
Excellent. Perfect timing. There's been a lot of news in the last 72 hours regarding the New York Police Department. Just a quick recap. Sal Greco is a 15-year veteran of the New York Police Department, served the city of New York and its people with distinction, sometimes in some of the loneliest and most dangerous graveyard shifts in some of the most dangerous parts of the country. Was terminated by the current administration. He is challenging that termination in court. The city has tried several times to have that action dismissed, and the judge has refused to do that. And he has become a one-man truth squad when it comes to this administration. So, Sal, what happened this week?
There was a lot that happened. As you heard, the FBI went to One Police Plaza. They also went to the home of the illustrious New York City Police Commissioner Ed Caban's house. His brothers, who I've actually mentioned one of them on the show before, are also in rail. I don't know. I guess they're in this also, and there's a lot. It's basically a mega corruption probe going on, centered around Eddie Caban and some other executives. And one of the main subjects of this investigation, Roger, was something that I've brought up before here. And this wonderful establishment that used to be in the Bronx, which now shuttered, it was called Con Sofrito up there in Commerce Avenue. And it was owned by Richard Caban, the brother of Eddie Caban. And I've gotten my hands on some exclusive stuff here. And you actually reposted on your X, too. It's up on my X right now. So back in 2021, I could exclusively tell you that there was an incident that occurred there inside of Con Sofrito. And after this incident, an NYPD official made a criminal referral to the NYPD Vice Enforcement Division. So the NYPD Vice Enforcement Division, so people don't understand, it identifies persons or organizations that are involved in human trafficking, prostitution, and internet crimes against children, focusing on victim-based crimes. So this criminal referral went to them, and this email, as you could tell, was someone, as the other official, was from the Vice Human Trafficking Unit. So as someone from the Vice Human Trafficking Unit had a criminal referral in regards to Con Sofrito in the Bronx in late 2021, they also were hit with an SLA violation, which also mysteriously they pulled, and there's no explanation why. There's no paperwork explaining that. We don't understand what happened here with this criminal referral and what happened in regards to this referral or this incident with the Con Sofrito in the Bronx. But as you know, Roger, and as I've explained in the past, they had an illegal party shed. The building department ordered them to tear it down. The FDNY, they called it a fire trap, hit them with numerous violations. They remained open. Everybody from, especially Letitia James, the Attorney General, Carl Hastie, the Assembly Speaker, Eric Adams, Eddie Caban, a high number of NYPD executives and their underlings, all seen there partying all the time. I don't know exactly what's going on there, but of course, this is borderline criminal in the fact that they had a court order and they flouted it. They were told to close this shed. They never did. Finally, the landlord dragged them to court. They had to be instructed to shut it down. Another court order, which they violated, and then finally they did. When they did, they had another illegal party outside where the sheriff, Miranda is the New York City sheriff. He was outside having a drink with the co-manager of the place, who's a mob associate. That's a whole nother story. And they finally told them, look, that's it. Party's over. They ordered the marshals came and shut down the place. And now plenty of questions are arising out of Con Sofrito and what happened in 2021, where the police department clearly had a criminal referral to the Vice Enforcement Unit Division, Human Trafficking Division, and whatever came about that, because now there's a lot of questions in regards to Eddie Caban, his brothers, and this whole protection unit involving nightclubs and other nefarious things that they were probably or maybe involved in.
All right, Sal, we appreciate that update. We do have to note that Mayor Adams nor any member of his administration is yet to be charged with a crime. And in America, you're still innocent until proven guilty. But I have to admit, things are not looking too good for the diminutive mayor. Sal, thanks for calling the Roger Stone Show.
Thank you a lot, Roger. God bless. See you soon.
All right, let's go to Judith in Brooklyn. Judith, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hi, Roger. Thank you so much. I'm calling about this Kamala Harris. She's this flip-flopper, okay, where she sees fit to benefit. That's how she flip-flops. And let me give you an example. You know, as DA/prosecutor, she held back DNA from an innocent man who could have been put away for many years, and she should have been disbarred for it. She held that back from him, an innocent man. Yet in 2020, there she was, the champion for criminal riders, raising funds to bail them out. Actually, they went on to do murder as well. She encouraged riders on television shows. Clearly, she is pro-crime. And quite frankly, Roger, as far as I'm concerned, she blew it, okay? 3.5 years as VP. She is responsible for all the murders due to open, insecure borders. That's her track record and worse. And then when you take a look at President Trump and his proven record while he was president, it is so unbelievably opposite and so clear who the person is that you should vote for the safety and well-being and American values and everything that's really great to vote for, because she is just, you know, her track record speaks for itself. You know, she's shameful.
Hey, Judith, thank you for your call. I've been looking into the case of a woman named Sharee Peoples. She is an African-American woman who was actually sent to jail by Kamala Harris as district attorney because Sharee Peoples' daughter was true. She wasn't in school. That's because she had sickle cell anemia and she was in the hospital. This dragged on for years. Sharee just recently told me that her daughter had a serious lung infection, only recently out of the hospital. The more I dig into this story, the more shocking I find it. I think Kamala Harris was doing this to make the issue of truancy, in which she jails the parents, a part of her campaign for California Attorney General. We hope to get Sharee here on the Roger Stone Show. But thank you so much for your call. Let's go to Giancarlo in New Jersey. Giancarlo, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, thanks for having me. How are you?
Great. I appreciate your call. What's on your mind?
So I know you've been involved in countless campaigns, presidential campaigns, going back to Nixon. Out of all the candidates you've worked with, which campaign is your favorite?
Yeah, that's a very tough question. I think the answer might surprise you. My favorite campaign, the one that I'm proudest of, was my very first campaign in 1966. I was the deputy campaign manager for a man named John Lupton, who was running for the state senate in Connecticut in a district that consisted of New Canaan, Westport, Weston, Wilton, and Darien, which was one of the wealthiest Republican districts in the country, never mind the state. And John Lupton had been Goldwater's chairman in the state of Connecticut in 1964. Earlier in that cycle, I had worked for as a volunteer in the congressional campaign of a Connecticut congressman named Ab Seibel, who was trying to make a comeback. And I noticed that Seibel was a kind of a moderate Republican. People in his campaign seemed a lot more interested in going to cocktail parties than they did going to the phone bank or going door to door. And John Lupton was a great candidate. His campaign manager was a guy named Howard Long, who was right out of Mad Men. He was a New York advertising executive. He was the campaign manager, took me on as his deputy. I was a kid, and I learned an enormous amount from him. It was an amazing campaign. We took on the Republican establishment, and we beat them in the primary. It was the most exciting campaign I'd ever been in. I guess everybody remembers their first time. This was my first time. I'm going to write a little monograph about it because after Goldwater lost in 1964, I was disheartened. And then in 1965, I supported a candidate for mayor in what was then my hometown of Norwalk, Connecticut. Louis J. Padula was a great man, was the majority leader of the Connecticut State House of Representatives, but he lost. So I had 2 back-to-back losses until I signed on with John Lupton. He was a great man. He was a great senator. It was a great campaign. It's the campaign in which I learned that conservatives actually do the work. Conservatives are in politics not because they want to go to the cocktail parties, not because they want to get fancy titles, but because they believe in something. It's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. Thank you, Giancarlo. All right, let's go to Lorna, who's in Long Island. Lorna, thanks for calling the Roger Stone Show.
Hi, thank you. So I just wanted to say something that Donald Trump doesn't talk about. So I am going to talk about it for him. When he opened up his club in Palm Beach, Mar-a-Lago, he insisted on accepting Jews and blacks, even though other clubs in Palm Beach to this day discriminated against blacks and Jews. So the Old Guard in Palm Beach, they were outraged that Trump wanted to accept blacks and Jews. Anyways, in the 90s, he was running into problem getting his golf club, his golf course approved by the local town council because they were imposing restrictions on his bid. So Trump shot back at him. He was like, he claimed that local officials, they seemed to accept the established private clubs in town that had excluded Jews and blacks while imposing tough rules on his inclusive one. So, my point is, in judging the character of an individual, it pays to see what people actually do when no one's really paying attention. And in the end, he won. It may have been in his best interest to simply look the other way, but instead Trump did the right thing, and he insisted on desegregation at his golf resort, and he won. And also what was it? I think Abraham Foxman was the Anti-Defamation League president at that time, and he praised Trump for elevating the issue of discrimination at private clubs. He even told the Wall Street Journal that, he put the light back on Palm Beach, not on the beauty and the glitter, but on the horrible side of discrimination, and it had an impact. So I just want more people to know about that, because people, they listen to the mainstream media. He's racist. He's not one bit racist, but people, there are things like, and I know more stories than this, but people don't know any of these stories about him.
Well, as you may know, Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition here in New York City gave him an award with Rosa Parks, and he arranged for free office space for their nonprofit. Donald Trump doesn't have a racist bone in his body, and they all loved him until he got into politics. But everything you say is true. By the way, some of those clubs didn't allow Catholics either. It wasn't just blacks and Jews. Many Catholics were discriminated against. Donald Trump, who I've known for 45 years, nothing racist about him at all. He introduced me to Muhammad Ali. It was one of the high points of my life at the 1988 Republican National Convention in New Orleans. An excellent call. Thank you so much for calling us here at the Roger Stone Show. Folks, the phone lines are still open. It's 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. We'll be right back to take some more of your questions, so don't go away.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC. It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
And we're back, folks. The phone lines are open. That's 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. Let's go to Max in East Hampton. Max, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Yeah, hi. I hope that you contact the Trump campaign to verify what I have to say. And this is it. I examined the income tax tables from 2023, and I compared them to the tax tables to 2024. And the current president of the United States ran on a platform that anyone who makes less than $400,000 per year will not receive a tax increase. And my examination revealed that if a person has a taxable income of about $200,000 for the year, that person or a joint filing, a married couple, would pay an additional $2,600 in 2024 as compared to 2023. And if a couple, a married couple, has a taxable income, a federal taxable income of about $400,000, that couple will pay about $5,000 more in federal tax as compared to 2023. So I hope that you may want to ask the Trump campaign to verify what I'm saying.
All right, Max. I'm not a tax expert, so I don't know personally, but I appreciate your call, and I will follow up, and I will check on that. As far as I remember, Donald Trump cut taxes across the board on all Americans, just as Ronald Reagan did, just as John F. Kennedy did. But thank you again for your call. All right. How about Beryl in New York? Beryl, thanks for calling the Roger Stone Show.
Yes, I want to say about the New York Times poll shows Donald Trump up 1%. What you say about this left polls shows all the time Donald Trump and win more from the poll shows. For why the 538 average or all other averages take in this polls, no right polls, poll shows the truth. For why take the 538 average, take in the polls?
Well, and I talked about this earlier in the show. When looking at polling, first of all, I don't think you can ever look at any one poll. I think the best way to do this is to look at a number of polls taken within the same time frame, where you have confidence in the methodology, meaning that the sample size is large enough, that the questions are asked in a neutral way, that the questions are asked in the proper order, or something called order bias that you want to avoid, where you don't ask or insert any negative information about any candidate prior to asking the ballot. But remember that a poll is a snapshot in time. In other words, it is only good for that episecond in which it is tabulated and reported, because literally within hours, voter opinions shift, and they shift based on large and important events and sometimes small events. So you saw after the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, which incredibly an extraordinary number of people keeps telling me on social media never actually really happened. No one ever really shot at Trump. Nobody was killed. That is an outrage. That is an insult to the memory of Corey Comparatori, the brave firefighter who died by taking one in the head while shielding his daughter and his wife. What's even more outrageous is those who say that I somehow orchestrated this fake assassination attempt. Let me remind you, Alex Jones got sued for millions and millions of dollars for claiming that no one was shot at Sandy Hook, and the Sandy Hook families argued that brought harassment upon their families. There are people now harassing my family, claiming ridiculously that I was somehow involved in an effort to fabricate some assassination attempt on Donald Trump. Absolutely, positively outrageous and irresponsible. But, Beryl, I thank you very much for your call. We've got a little bit of time here. Let's stay with the board. Let's take Andrew in Stanhope. Andrew, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Great guest that you had on earlier. The only mistake when she said Kamala Harris was soft on crime, that's true, except if it was a black man with small amounts of marijuana, then she threw the book at him. And luckily, Trump changed those laws, the Second Chance Act, the First Step Act, and also school choice, the Platinum Plan, all things that help the African-American community. And like you said about his history of working with civil rights leaders, he also was one of the major funders of the first potential black president, Jesse Jackson. And he won not one, but 2 Rosa Parks Awards for job creation in the black community. And also Jim Brown, his anti-gang violence. Trump was one of the major supporters, funders of that as well. But I just want to say, speaking of that race, the difference between Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, it's a stark difference because I think, number one, Barack was very likable and, it was historic, so it's no longer historic. With her, she has a track record and inflation in the economy, and it was kind of used with Obama. Well, you better vote for him, Western Pennsylvania, or else you guys are still racist. You're not. So almost like, okay, we'll prove we're not racist. But with Kamala, I see man on the street with African-American women, and they often say, what? We're not going to vote for her just because she's black. So they care about the economy. Only snobs, academic elites will vote for her. So I just see it very different than when Obama ran because she's not likable. She has a bad track record. People care about the economy. And Willie Brown, they know that she had an affair with him. A lot of the older people that's how she advanced herself politically in San Francisco. Just want to hear your thoughts on that, and I'll hang up.
I think you raise a very important point. She actually attacked Joe Biden in the 2020 Democrat presidential debates for being the author of the 1994 crime bill, which is the bill which required the harsh mandatory penalties for the first-time nonviolent crime of possession of small amounts of drugs for personal use. But she failed to mention that she herself had locked up thousands of overwhelmingly black people for exactly that charge, and in some cases kept them incarcerated beyond the period of their sentences so that they could provide cheap labor for the state. Tulsi Gabbard came along and nailed her in a subsequent debate on exactly that. It is epic hypocrisy. Look, it was Richard Nixon gave us the war on drugs, but the war on drugs under Nixon was aimed at drug kingpins, drug traffickers, drug cartels. We're now talking about people with no prior criminal record, people who belong in drug treatment programs, not in incarceration, because they're not dangerous to anyone but themselves. I think it is a giant area of hypocrisy in her record, and it is just one such example. There are others. I think we will hear about others in the course of this campaign. I thank you again for your question. Jack in New York, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. I saw this thing about Ask Alexa, that AI thing.
Yes.
And if you call Ask Alexa and you ask her, should I vote for Trump? The response is, we can't give any commentary on politics. We're neutral. But if you call back and say, should I vote for Kamala Harris? They give you this whole rap about how wonderful she is.
Look, this is part and parcel of this Silicon Valley censorship and manipulation of information for political purposes. So we know that in 2020, if you were a registered Democrat and you had Gmail, that Google sent you multiple reminders that you should vote. But if you were a Republican, you got no such reminder. When the Trump campaign would put out a press release, it would end up in your spam. When Hillary Clinton's campaign put out a press release, it would end up in your email box. I talked about this a little bit earlier in the show because I still think internet censorship, media censorship, is one of the most dangerous problems in the country. We can't solve any of our problems if we can't talk freely and openly about them. And when Robert Kennedy made what I thought was an incredibly selfless decision to abandon his own presidential campaign and endorse a Republican, think about that for a moment, a Kennedy endorsing a Republican, putting aside his own ambitions, putting aside his own ego, he listed 3 issues on which he made this decision. 1, the issue of war. We unfroze $190 billion in assets for a rogue regime in Iran. And now we are basically funding both sides of that war. So it is precisely why that plus the poisoning of our food, those were the 3 major issues that he made this decision on. I have nothing but admiration for him. He is a man who has put the country first. I think that it is setting the stage for a complete political realignment. I think that's entirely possible. Those who try to say that this will have no impact, I really think that they are entirely wrong. We have a few more minutes here, folks. Again, our number, 800-848-9222, 800-848-9222. Scott, you're on the line here in New York City. What is your question?
Okay, I'll get to my question in 1 second. But with regard to the background of how we got into the mess we're in with regard to immigration, cultural Marxist indoctrination in the schools, et cetera, the propaganda in the media, I wanted to recommend a book. It's The Culture of Critique by Dr. Kevin MacDonald. It goes into the left-wing ideologies that have really taken over the Democrat Party and really infiltrated our society from top to bottom.
I apologize. We are unfortunately out of town, so we're not going to get to your question, but we very much appreciate your book recommendation. Folks, you don't want to go anywhere because Joe Piscopo is going to be right along. I heard him sing the other night at Cipriani at the 77 WABC Charitable Gala. This guy's got a set of pipes that is just unbelievable. So don't go anywhere because my good friend Joe Piscopo will be right along with Sundays with Sinatra. God bless you and Godspeed, and thank you for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.